in the interaction with our panel of speakers. So, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Neth Danyo from the Philippines. I'm from the Action Group on Erosion, Technology and Concentration, or etc. group. We're a small civil society organization with offices in Canada, Philippines, Mexico, and colleagues in many other places. We track and monitor new and emerging technologies and how they impact communities, marginalized communities.
Hi everyone, welcome to this session. Thank you for being here. My name is Tamra Gilbertson. I'm the Climate Justice Program Coordinator for the Indigenous Environmental Network. And I just want to start with a brief statement and then pass it back over to my colleague Neth to introduce our first speaker. So thank you again for being here. Over the past 20 years of carbon markets, carbon offsets, and REDD+, these market-based mechanisms have failed to deliver greenhouse gas emissions reductions. We do not have time for these faulty replications and expansions of carbon markets like we're seeing now being negotiated in Article 6. The focus of the talks here at the UNFCCC COP28 should be about, or must be, about phasing out fossil fuels at source if we are to fight for environmental and social justice. Yet we continue to see a push to shift language and meaning to undermine any meaningful attempt to phase out fossil fuels and uphold the rights of Indigenous peoples. False solutions like abated fossil fuels, carbon dioxide removals, nature-based solutions, blue carbon, carbon capture and storage, hydrogen, nuclear, and other misguided and dangerous geoengineering technologies like solar radiation geoengineering are just some of the key issues that this great panel is going to talk about today. And we will continue to explore the false solutions that create a barrier to real and meaningful environmental, climate, and social justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamra. And as we have promoted together with this side event, we are calling for Article 6 to respect the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples, to respect gender justice and the integrity of the environment. We will be presenting examples from different regions to be presented by colleagues and comrades from various civil society organizations and social movements. So this event will explore the links and interactions between carbon markets, geoengineering, forest conservation, and the real solutions needed on the ground to achieve climate justice. As we mentioned, we have 5 esteemed panelists. I have the pleasure to introduce the first panelist, Panganga Pungowiyi, who is an Indigenous mother from Sivunga, located on the Dena'ina Islands in the so-called Anchorage, Alaska. Panganga has been involved in many grassroots efforts seeking justice for Indigenous peoples, including efforts to protect lands and water from extractive industry, MMIWG and DVSA, against Indigenous communities. Social justice and healing are recurring themes woven within Panganga's personal and professional life. Many years were spent developing and hosting communal healing spaces for historical trauma and colonial oppression. And most recently, Panganga began training as a tribal healer and birth worker in the so-called Bering Strait region. So I'd like to introduce Panganga, who is IEN's climate geoengineering organizer. So you have the floor.
Kuyakamsi wanga atka bangangang nang naka bangawi wanga adaka alanatra manaka Kirsten Nugak Pass wanga Sivunga kami. So I'm from St. Lawrence Island, and my clan is the Kiwagami. So our island has survived several waves of genocide, colonization, the first of which was in the 1800s, the late 1800s. The European whalers came and decimated our whale population and collapsed our marine ecosystem. At the same time, Krakatoa erupted, and this caused 2 years of straight winter in Alaska. And so there was a huge famine that wiped out 99% of our population. And we survived. We repopulated our island with people from Indian Point in Siberia who speak the same language and have the same culture. We also, at the time, obviously developed strong relations with our relatives over in Russia, which was disrupted during the Cold War. During the Cold War, a military base was built on our island that was large enough to sustain 200 troops for 2 years. And when it was time for the troops to leave, they were told to take a backpack, cut the lines and leave. So they spilt heavy metal solvents and fuel on our island, which seeped into our marine mammal population and into our bodies. So we have a very high rate of cancer. In addition to this, the military exposed us to radioactive iodine injections to see if our bodies would survive longer in the cold with radiation. And so we have a long history of having been treated as both the stepping stool and the dumping grounds of Western science and Western society. And it is this history that I carry with me and the resilience that I carry with me as I talk about Article 6 and geoengineering and carbon markets. So we see time and time again how the sacrifice of peoples, generally indigenous peoples, in resource extraction and industry has led us to the climate crisis already. The false solutions potentially sanctioned under Article 6 is a continuation of that legacy. Article 6 of the Paris Agreement has been a topic of significant debate due to its potential impact on carbon markets and geoengineering. A global carbon market will have profoundly harmful impacts on indigenous peoples. Already the use of carbon markets, pricing, offsets, and the so-called technologies that accompany these are treating indigenous bodies, lands, airs, and waters like sacrifice zones. Article 6 has the potential nature separately from us. We have a vast multi-generational wisdom about the interconnectedness of our ecosystems that Western science fails to comprehend. We have already been subject to the testing of geoengineering technologies, including hollow glass microsphere spreading, stratospheric aerosol injection, ocean fertilization, just in Alaska. Each of these has far-reaching health impacts to our ecosystems and our bodies, which are so interrelated we consider ourselves one and the same. This includes tuberculosis, rheumatoid arthritis, drought, monsoon cycle disruption, toxic algal blooms, and pulmonary damage in our animals. All of this is done without our free, prior, and informed consent. And on top of all of this, these are used to people. These measures on indigenous lands continues to treat us as sacrifice zones. This is what has gotten us into the climate crisis in UNDRIP. Geoengineering, carbon markets, traditional ecological knowledge, or traditional indigenous knowledge, as we like to call it now. In conclusion, the provisions of Article 6 of the Paris Agreement have the potential to significantly impact indigenous peoples and our rights. It is essential for policymakers and stakeholders to engage with our communities in a meaningful and respectful manner to address these concerns and ensure that any climate action respects and upholds the rights of our peoples. Thank you.
you so much. Oh, hello. Thank you so much, Panganga. And we're going to hold questions to the end. I'm thrilled to introduce our next speaker, Eduardo Gilbertson. He's an engineer with studies on public policies and management from the University of Chile. He's also a professor of political ecology in the University of Chile. He has a wide experience of public environmental management and socio-environmental activism and leadership in Chile and throughout Latin America. He's a founding member of the Chilean Colectivo Ventesur and also a regional coordinator of the global campaign to demand climate justice and member of the Latin American and Caribbean Platform for Climate Justice. Thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you. It was very strange to come in to this room and find that the previous side event was about promoting carbon markets. Sorry for my English. Yeah, it's not good. I will make the best. I have a presentation. Yes, thank you. I will show to you the experience that we as DCJ from Latin America and the Caribbean are being developing jointly with the Latin American and Caribbean Platform for Climate Justice about and facing the false solutions in our region. Really, the impacts of false solutions in our region are so bad as the impacts of climate change. And the resistance to these false solutions are as relevant as in facing the impacts of climate change because they are very linked to the big problem of our region that is extractivism. We are developing jointly a project called Stop Climate Corporate Capture in Latin America and the Caribbean that is very focused on the implementation of instrument that is a map of our solutions for our region. Please, the next one, the three next one. For going, I can? Thank you. The objectives of the project are to make visible the false solutions in our region, to support communities to resist false solutions, and also to strengthen the relationship and articulation of our networks, DCJ and the platform and other allies in the region, to support and fight with the communities against false solutions. The map of false solutions in fact is not it's not an instrument to design it for tracking negotiations, but we think it is very helpful to link the real situation, the real impacts that false solutions are in the territories, in our lands, with as an income of the campaigners that are tracking negotiations also. For building the map, we were very concerned about not not filling a map with, with, with conflicts and with local conflicts that are not clearly related to false solutions. Then we made a very complete exercise of conceptualization of the false solutions to climate change. And the general description of false solutions is that they are presented as solutions and then supposedly help to mitigate and adapt, but they are false because they reproduce the system that causes climate change. They mainly not reduce emissions, but they opt for offsets or risky technologies that manipulate the environment and the atmosphere. And also, they generate negative impacts on communities and territories. But the first thing is that they, in fact, are presented as real solutions. In our logo, as DCJ, there is a wind farm, but really, in our region, and we will see some examples. For example, wind farms are displacing people and affecting ecosystems more than fossil fuels plants, for example, yeah, and are being increasingly opposed by communities, mostly indigenous peoples communities. The second one, inside mitigation, are the capture carbon
events where those things are repairable. Now, the big question has been, where would this funding come from? On the first day of this COP, the biggest chunk came from the United Arab Emirates, $100 million. The second chunk, big chunk, came from Germany. And then if you look at what the EU brought collectively, and then the United States brought a miserly $17 million. Now, what really disturbed me about the spread of the finance is the fact that the loss and damage ought to be predicated on the justice principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Because most of the NDCs, nationally determined contribution, must be justice
This is a very diverse
India, other who are facing the challenge of climate change, they have only a small window of vulnerable countries. So they will have to go through a first filter for eligibility whenever they will apply for any grant regarding loss and damage. So how do you feel about this, and what could be done at this stage when the agreement is already done? Thank you.
Great, thank you for the question. I'm going to summarize, if that's okay, just to sort of refresh us, and then I'll hand this over to the panelists. What solutions can be implemented? How do we think about lobbying as a full solution? Also, nuclear is being pushed here as a solution everywhere, but also some comments on how that may affect the Global South. And also our most recent question on loss and damage, and also it's being structured as a success, but for countries like Pakistan, India, and others, how do we look at that in terms of a window of possibility? So I'm going to open this up to the panelists. Does somebody want to start, or should I voluntold someone?
Oh, yeah, well, yes. Yeah, well, I can make a few. Well, on real solutions, I think this is a really important question. I always say, because we have this work in ETC group, that one of the most important real solutions is decentralized, biodiverse, agroecological agriculture and local, circles of consumption. It's because we have been working on that for a long time at ETC group. And if you extrapolate the emissions of the fossil fuel industry and the fossil fuel-based industries, you will have that almost half, including livestock and deforestation, and so are related to industrial food system. So some things the real solutions are to stop this kind of systems that are not even feeding most of the world, because the industrial food system only feeds 30% of the population, 30% of the population. The rest, 70% of the population of the world, is fed by small production, small food producers, peasants, women peasants, fishermen, artisanal fishermen, artisanal algae cultivators, indigenous community. These are the people really feeding the world, and particularly feeding the most that needs the food, because the others only sell the food, right? So we have that in our hands, because the majority is already, dependent most on this, and we are all there, so to say. But I think that maybe, just to leave other spaces, what we need to get out of our, maybe not most of you here, but what we need to get out of this mentality is this about getting a global solution for everybody that is the same in the same way. Like Eduardo was saying, solar or wind can be damaging depending on where it is. It's not a damaging technology in itself, it's good. But depending if it is occupying a traditional community somewhere, it's bad. So we don't have one solution. So real solutions is about diversity. Real solution is about integrating all the forms of diversity and all the forms of knowledge in different places, and see how we can solve our lives without this crazy emission rate, right? That is okay. That we can really do, because most of emissions are done by like 1%. So it's not difficult.
Thank you, Sylvia. Nima, would you like to take the next question? Yes. Then I see Eduardo also wants to respond.
Okay, thank you for the questions. And I want to contribute a quick one just to add to what Sylvia just said about the solutions that can be taken up. I believe that one of the clear solutions is what the COP has been struggling with. They wouldn't even want to name it, and now they're struggling to use the F word, the fossil fuels. We simply have to leave fossil fuels in the ground. And we've seen a clear example in Ecuador. On 20th August this year, the people of Ecuador voted in a free referendum to leave fossil fuels in the ground at Yasuni. And so I thought this would send a signal to the COP that, look, you should mobilize or Yasunize the world to keep the fossils in the ground. because that ultimately is not about, as Sylvia said, you don't release the carbon, then you look for how to absorb it from the atmosphere. So let's keep it in the soil. Keep the oil in the soil, keep the coal in the hole, and leave the tar sands where they belong. Then with regard to loss and damage, I believe that it's really problematic because this is what I was prefacing, the manner of the raising of the funding. If the funding was strictly based on historical responsibility, nobody would be putting stumbling blocks for India, for Pakistan, and others. And so I think what our negotiators ought to do is to insist that loss and damage should be damage for payment for damage done historically and currently. And when we look at the historical damage done, I mean, nobody should put any stumbling block for India, who has to deal with so many people, billions, I mean, several millions of people. So I think this is what the stress should be.
Great. Eduardo and then Panganga?
Yeah, thank you. Also sorry, because I have to go after because we'll be starting the Latin American and Caribbean Assembly. Yeah. We think in DCJ, Latin America and the Caribbean, that it's dangerous to look for real solutions without having clarity that false solutions are based on false needs. The false solutions are not trying to solve real needs, the needs of the people. The false solutions are for profit, private profit, are for economic growth, are for increasing the differences, the injustice, and then we have not to look for replacing each false solution by one real solution, without asking what are the energy for and para quién o para qué y para quién. ¿Cómo se dice? For whom and at what for. Then the big answer is system change or not. But we are very clear that the system will not be changed in COPs. Yeah, the system will be changed with political processes in our countries, and finally the COPs maybe will express this change, this political change, this paradigmatic change in COPs. Yeah, but only for adding, the real solutions has to be built on sovereignty, on democracy, on transparency. And it's the climate crisis and the energy crisis, it's more a political dilemma than a technological dilemma. So, thanks.
Thank you, Eduardo. And Panganga, do you want to take this final question? We'll do another round. Thank you. Okay. And Amy, after you. Okay.
Did you want to talk, Amy? Okay. So I wanted to bring into the space a couple of colleagues of mine. One of them is named Aklasia Kamasok. And she talks about how, as a society, we have forgotten how to be in relationship with one another. And we understand that colonization, patriarchy, white supremacy, militarism, capitalism, and an extraction-based economy have stolen this from us, our ability to be in good relationship with one another and to be in good relationship with the land on which we reside. All of these unnatural ways of being work together to sustain each other. Climate solutions are not preventing sea ice loss or reflecting the sun. We don't address climate change by treating our land and waters as carbon sinks or building man-made structures to sequester carbon or mine for nuclear. These show that the Western science narrowly focuses on the symptoms of climate change, leading to a cycle of running to the next emergency, attempting mitigation, not meeting the threshold, and starting over. Focusing on mitigation and not the root cause, like the burning of fossil fuels, is a deadly compromise we can't afford. True and sustainable solutions do not lie in a university or a laboratory or think tanks, but in relationship with your community, local organizations, and the indigenous peoples on whose land you reside. And remember that indigenous peoples have been in good relationship with the land for time immemorial and have managed to protect about 85% of what's left of Earth's biodiversity. Another colleague that I really look up to is named Bentham Ohai, and he poses some questions that really made us think as indigenous peoples across Alaska and helped kind of set a fire under us. So he asked a room full of us, what counts as knowledge, what knowledge counts, and who decides? And he said, what counts as power, what power counts, and who decides? And so I ask you, what counts as a solution, what solutions count, and who decides? And so rather than looking at a panel of people to ask what the real solutions are, maybe changing our vision, changing our perspective, to recognize that false solutions are always going to be rooted in capitalism and colonialism. So even if you had a quote-unquote safe solution, as long as it's still rooted in capitalism and the exploitation of peoples, it's going to be a false solution. And those solutions that are rooted in having healthy relationship, equitable relationship with peoples and lands, those are going to be your real solutions.
Thank you so much, Panganga, for that excellent intervention and response. Amy, do you want to go ahead?
I want to just respond to Kavita's question on nuclear power. So I come from Malaysia, being close to Southeast Asia countries. I'm sure most are familiar with the Fukushima nuclear plant disaster, which is more than 10 years ago. So the radioactive wastewater was just recently released to the South China Sea Ocean. And the Korean fishermen were making a lot of noise, but the Korean government is saying, no, we support Japan to release the water, okay? So it's political. The Japanese fishing industry is affected, and there's rumor among Southeast Asian community, we're not going to eat the fish anymore from the sea. So it will affect the fishing industry, not those big ones, but the local fishermen. And what will happen? So nuclear power is definitely not the answer. We have seen this, from Fukushima, and yet we have not learned, unfortunately. Yeah.
Thank you very much to the panel for the very comprehensive responses to the questions. We actually have a few more minutes left. We can probably entertain one or two questions. And I think Eduardo is also, not to ask question, to offer more answer.
Sorry for saying goodbye.
Oh, okay.
And
yes.
also,
okay.
and
Yes.
also to say that nuclear power is in the map as a solution.
Of course, it has to be there.
Also, yeah.
Okay. So is there any more question at this point that you'd like to engage the panel with? Okay, there's one there at the back, and then the lady here in front, and then we'll close the discussions and have the panel reply.
Hi, my name is Shay. I'm a student at College of the Atlantic. And as we know, we can see like at this COP and in the world in general, there's a tremendous amount of money and power associated with the propagation of and promoting of false solutions. And I'm just wondering, like, what advice you guys have for youth and other climate activists who want to shift the attention away from these topics, and how we can go about doing that without being overpowered by, yeah.
Yes, the lady in blue in the front row, please.
Thank you. My name is Eva Hallström and I come from the Green Women in Sweden. I think one solution is energy efficiency. We waste so much energy and just don't look on energy efficiency. So I come from an area we have reduced our greenhouse emission with 70% just looking at energy efficiency. And then we also earn money as well. So we save money, reduce our greenhouse emission, and do it by energy efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We'll give our panelists 1 minute each to respond and also to give your closing statements. We'll start with Panganga. We go that way.
So advice. Prior to my work in geoengineering, I did prevention work that followed like a public health model. And what we found is to really get things going, you need to just reach 6% of a population. So if you can reach 6% of the population that you're trying to shift, that will start getting you the momentum. So joining actions, promoting actions, getting to know a system within COP, that's one way, but most of our work happens outside of these spaces because there's only so much influence we can have in here. A lot of the work is on the ground, so get yourself connected with us outside of this space.
I'm going to suggest something radical, but it's common now among young people. You bring your country to ICJ, you sue your country. That's what the young people are doing nowadays, right? The one or two young people, yeah, and then the Dutch young people as well, yeah. So that's one way of getting attention and waking them up.
Yes, there was a question I heard at COP15 that young people were asking the negotiators, and I think it's time to ask them the question again. So if you meet any of the delegates, ask them, how old would you be in the year 2060 or, at the end of the century? If they give you a fair answer, then you can ask them how are they preparing for that. Secondly, yesterday there was the launching of an international coalition that aims to take power back with the people, so as to really begin from now till for the next few years to mobilize against all the false solutions and against all the false politics, so that by the time, the next couple of years, the COP, if the COP still exists, would be the people's space.
Thank you. Sylvia?
I think they already said
Too
it.
much? No, okay. So thank you very much for all our panelists for giving those very concrete, even radical advice, if you call ICJ radical. I thought that Amy would say something more inciting than that, inciting and exciting than that. But thank you very much for all those concrete thoughts. We hope that you found this side event engaging, productive, and useful in your respective work. Feel free to approach any of the organizers, our panelists, and get to know more information. As you leave the room, we would suggest that you get a copy of etc. Group's publication, and also to say thanks on behalf of the co-organizers of this side event, Gender CC, Women and Gender Constituency, Indigenous Environment Network, IN, HOMEF, the Hands Off Mother Earth, no, sorry. This is, I get confused because there are two HOMEF here. HOMEF, as in Health of Mother Earth, Foundation, which Nemo represents, and Hands Off Mother Earth, another home. Also Life and DCJ, and lastly, etc. group. So thank you very much. I give the very last word to my co-moderator, Tamra.
Thank you, Nath. It's been great to co-facilitate with Nath today. I want to also thank all of the panelists and everyone for coming today. It's incredibly important that we fight the false solutions in these spaces because they are the barriers to the real solutions. They're the things that are holding us back to seeing the world that we want to see. So we don't come here with, oh, it's so depressing or so negative. We come here with, we're going to fight, and it's the most beautiful thing to build that unity together. So thank you all so much for coming today. We are now at the end of the all of the sort of initial negotiatings. We move into a rest state. All of the final texts then begin to be negotiated in the full CMIA and the full COP starting on Friday. So that's really when this fight begins, and I am so grateful for all of you. I want you to know that you can see our COP28 fact sheets from the Indigenous Environmental Network, and if you run over, it's really not far, to booth number 30 right now, you can grab as many of those and Hoodwinked in the Hot Houses and stickers and really cool stuff. So go now because they're going to shut it down any minute. We really appreciate you all. Thank you all again so much.
And thank you to the technical staff for the patience and the support.
Yes, thank you for the technical staff for being so attentive. Really appreciate you too.